We have discovered they destroyed the ballot images. It is against violation of federal law. This isn't voter fraud, Sean. This goes down to the heart of the issue. So whether there's mail-in or not, that's a secondary issue. The issue is that when people come bottoms up, they can manipulate. So it's always doofus one on the Republican Party facing doofus two on the Democrat Party. That's what has occurred here in Massachusetts. Our central message is Massachusetts destroyed over 1 million ballots, period. And second messaging here is the election is null and void.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thank you so very much for tuning in. That, of course, was Dr. Shiva, and boy did he get shafted in Massachusetts. Friends, this may be one of the most important interviews I've done all year as we're moving towards November very rapidly. But before we begin, just a quick word from this interview's sponsor. Off-the-grid living is a trend that's been gaining popularity for years, and one of the ways you can jumpstart your journey to off-grid living is with the solar water heater by Prepper's Peak. The solar water heater doesn't require any batteries because it's powered entirely by the built-in solar panels on the heater itself, allowing you to heat and boil water from virtually anywhere. All you need is the sun. It also comes with a 100% lifetime guarantee replacement. And I partnered with Prepper's Peak to give my audience 50% off their own solar water heater plus express rush shipping. So go to solarwaterheater.com or click the link in the video description box below to order yours today. Okay friends, let's begin. You know, we're seeing so much evidence of election fraud across the country, from Minneapolis with Ilhan Omar and her ballot harvesting, to ballots being destroyed or thrown in the garbage across the country, and it has every red-blooded patriot very worried that the demonic D's are going to steal elections across the country in November. Now, Dr. Shiva was running for a Senate seat in Massachusetts, and guess what happened? This is a very important story. Doc, thanks for coming back on. How are you?
Great to be here, Sean. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back, Shiva. All right, break it down for us. I know that you told me just the other day when we scheduled this that the head of the Massachusetts GOP is not a fan of Donald Trump. Tell us the story, because I think you should be the one on the ballot here in November.
Yeah, so I think the bottom line is, Sean, is that I'll start with the punchline, which so we can get to so everyone can understand, and then I'll give all the evidence of that. Over 1 million ballots were destroyed in the U.S. Senate primary election in Massachusetts. And this election that we just did is null and void. And that's really the core of it. Over 1 million ballots were destroyed. And the destruction of that ballot, what's amazing, Sean, is that the Secretary of State of Massachusetts Council has acknowledged they were destroyed, and they're trying to sort of cover it over. And so that's a key point. The backstory of this is, people know in 2018 I ran against Elizabeth Warren. Massachusetts, there's not Republicans and Democrats. It's a uniparty state. Anytime a conservative comes bottoms up, the Republicans actually destroy that person. They always get a designated loser to lose to the Democrats. So there's a history of the Republican Mass GOP destroying Republicans, Sean, over and over and over and over again. So in 2018, when I ran against Warren, they should have embraced me. I'm the epitome of the American dream. You know, a guy came from nothing, working class kid, got 4 degrees from MIT, started 7 different companies, etc. Instead, they found a designated loser. If you remember in 2018, a guy had photoshopped a picture shaking hands with Trump, and they promoted him as a Trumper to confuse the Trumpers en masse. We ran as an independent. We got about 100,000 votes. At least that was recorded in the general elections. 5 times more than any independent candidate, and they illegally kept us off the debate stage. So that was 2018. So this year, Sean, I ran as a Republican, and we said, you know what, given the brand equity built in 2018, a lot of people know about us. So we built a groundswell campaign, bottoms up, Sean. We got over 20,000 donations. We must have put up close to 10,000 lawn signs, 20,000 bumper stickers, 3,000 volunteers. We spent about $750,000, all small dollar donations, Sean, raised from people all over this country about our message of truth, freedom, and health. 500 different standouts. That's where volunteers go out. They hold up signs. And all of our volunteers, Sean, were working people, not, like college students who are Bernie supporters, right? That kind of people. Working people at full-time jobs who came to us because of the power of this campaign. By all of our numbers, by all physical observation, we were headed for a landslide victory. In fact, the data shows when I looked at September 1st evening, I said, God, everyone said, Shiva, are you going to win it, win it, win it? And I didn't want to jinx it. So I knew at 7 p.m. I had a landslide victory. And then the results start coming in, Sean. And they show 60-40, 60-40, 60-40. Now, this is a pasty-faced white guy, and I say that, no racism intended, who was nowhere to be found, nowhere. If you came, no one knew his name, no lawn signs, no bumper stickers, no organization. This guy gets 60-40 in an all-Hispanic neighborhood, 60-40 in a black neighborhood, 60-40 in an all-white neighborhood. I won in Franklin County where the votes were hand counted, Sean. Mm-hmm. So when this was occurring, I was saying, this doesn't make any sense. The word landslide was what was used across Massachusetts for the campaign we ran, Sean. So as we start digging into this, what do we discover? We discover that and by the way, people would write to me over the last 6 months. They say, Shiva, you're going to win this. The only thing that's going to destroy it for you is election fraud. And I sort of poo-pooed that, Sean. I just thought it was some fringe thing, But when this occurred, what I started finding out was that there are two ways ballots are counted, okay? Now, the important thing is the word I said, ballots are counted. A ballot is something that is counted, okay? So whatever is the ballot is the thing that was counted to determine the vote. Well, in Massachusetts, and like in many other states, when you walk into a polling booth, you fill out that paper, right? You choose who you're gonna vote. If it's a town that only takes paper ballots, right, then it's hand counted by human beings. Does that make sense? A human being looks at the dot and counts it, 1 vote for Sean, 1 vote for Shiva. If it's a town where they have the electronic ballots, which is pretty much 90% of Massachusetts, that paper that you filled out is scanned, step 1. After it's scanned, Sean, it's converted to an image, which is the image that the computer uses to scan and count the vote. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and by law, those scanned images are supposed to be saved for some period of time, correct?
22 months. So the point that I'm making is in the hand count thing, the paper is the ballot, but at the instant that thing gets scanned, that becomes a ballot, okay? By definition. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when this occurred, we got a lot of different calls from experts who've been looking at this, and they said, Shiva, do you know there's a feature in the voting systems where they can multiply your votes by a weight? So Sean, your vote can get multiplied by, 0.6, which is, a person's 3/5 of a vote. My vote could get multiplied by 2. This is a feature that was implemented in 2001 in the Diebold systems, which has gone to all other voting systems. That feature was put in. These voting companies wanted it. This is what they say. This is the excuse that they wanted to sell their product to homeowners associations. Where let's say you and me and 100 others are living in a condos. You have 1,000 square feet. I have 2,000, and we're voting on some issue, right? Well, and it's some issue that affects our taxes or our condo fees. In that example, they said Shiva should get 2 votes. Sean should get 1 vote. You see, it's a weighted vote. Got it?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that feature was put in. When they put that feature in, your vote and my vote was not stored as an integer, 1, 2, 3 in the system, but as a decimal, which is quite alarming. So your vote could be halved, my vote could be tripled. That feature was never removed for federal elections, John. It's in there. So if you look at the data showed we were going to win by 60, this guy by 40, and he was nowhere to be found, Sean, nowhere. So one of the things that happens, that's called factoring. It's called a weighted race. You can actually pick up the manual and it says it in the software when you set up the votes. When the weighted race feature is set up, Sean, guess what happens? And it also occurs at the candidate level. You got 100 votes, I got 100 votes. They could multiply your votes by 2 and mine by 0.5, okay? Within milliseconds. However, when the weighted race feature is set up, guess what happens, Sean? The ballot images get deleted. So when all of this occurred, it took us a while to understand all this. So we got a couple of good advisors and counselors. They said, Shiva, immediately go to the Secretary of State. And we have the FOIA request right here that I gave to them in person. I went right up on September 9th and I said, and we asked for various things. I want the ballot images, I want the log files, etc. And they have 10 days to respond to that. 10 business days was going to be, I think, September 23rd, okay? So we went back up there. By the way, the day that we went to hand it, we have it on video. The guy who's the election officer says to us, "Hey man, what do you think? This election was rigged?" Like, and I was real calm. And then he goes and we turn that feature off.
Oh, Shiva, back up. You froze up there. So he says, "Hey man, you think this election was rigged?" And then I lost
We have
you.
it all on video. And then after that, he goes, he looks, because I submitted this because I wanted to actually get the receipt that he got it, right? The physical receipt. And then he's reading it. And then he goes, we don't have those ballot images. We turned off that feature. And then he realizes what he said, Sean. And then he says, "Oh, I'll put this in writing." So September 23rd, it was due. Well, I think that was a Wednesday. And so nothing, we get nothing. So the next morning, I think Wednesday or Thursday, I call them up and I say, "Hey, where is you got to respond to this. It's a 10-day notice. You're illegal right now." I said, "You're violating federal law." You know what he says to me? "No, I'm violating basically Massachusetts law." Okay? That's a hubris they have. So I documented that conversation, sent it to them, and within 10 minutes, I get a letter back from the attorney. And I can share that with you if you want me to share a screen here.
Yeah, sure.
So that letter, let me bring it up right here.
And for the audience, guys, the final vote tally was 150,499 votes, or 60.2% for some guy named Kevin O'Connor, who evidently didn't have very many lawn signs out there. Well, Shiva got 99,308 votes. So really almost exactly 60-40. This reminds me so much of that race down in Florida, Tim Canova running in the primary
and Tim
versus Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Canova was a landslide frontrunner in that thing by all of their internal polling. He should have won that thing 70-30. She won it in a surprise victory, like 55-45%.
Yeah. And what's interesting in that case, in our situation, Sean, we were at 66% to 34%. So they flipped it. Okay. So in this situation, finally, we get a letter. Okay. And let me share this with you from the attorney, and I'll share this with you. So let me bring up the first document here. So we finally get this at 10:47 on September 24th. This was actually due by law on Wednesday. And it says, "Good morning." And by the way, what's interesting is we're asking for ballot images, right? We're asking a FOIA request. By law, she has to address those questions. Instead, this is like when I used to have students, you ask a student, "Where's your homework?" And they say, "Oh, how did the basketball game go today?" Okay, they're talking about something completely irrelevant. So here she's saying, "I'm writing to acknowledge receipt of your request for records. Please note this office does not maintain voter tabulation software, firmware, hardware. While this office certifies voting equipment as required by law, we do not purchase or lease equipment. Once equipment is approved by the office, cities and towns can purchase or lease such equipment. Accordingly, the office has no records responsive to your request." Now, this is the important part. "Further, to the extent you request the same information from local election officials, please note that the approval of digital scan equipment in Massachusetts specifically prohibits the capturing of ballot images." Okay? So the reason so basically capturing, well, let me tell you, first of all, this is complete bullshit. Remember, it goes through the scanner. What happened, Sean? What happened? Let me bring back, so that was the first email. I'll come back, Sean. Okay? So you saw that one, right?
Right.
When it goes through the scanner, Sean, the ballot images are always created, okay? Which means the ballot is there. So it got created, which means you have had to, in fact, the default setting is for it to be saved, Sean. They would have had to set the setting for it to be destroyed. You follow?
Well, the whole thing is so crooked, Shiva, because why wouldn't they just save the damn ballots, too? They have physical ballots, but they just throw those all away?
No, they saved the ballots. But it gets interesting. But she says those are sealed. You can't get at them for destruction. But the first point is I asked for the ballot images, okay? Because that is the ballot by law, Sean, because that's what was counted. We don't know, because remember, it's called the chain of custody. Someone could have written something here. And by the way, the software allows you to also alter ballot images, okay? Quite interesting. But the point is we asked for the ballot images because that is what was counted, okay? That is the ballot. So these guys are very insidious. That is the ballot. The ballot image is the ballot. Why? Because it is a thing that got counted. Okay. So she sends that note to me, basically telling me Massachusetts law prohibits us from saving the images, which means it was created and it got destroyed. So what do I write back, Sean? I write back a very simple question. Let me share with you the next one. And the question I write back to her is the following. Let me bring this up. The question I write back is, if that's the case, then can you please tell me what law you're referring to, right? That's very logical, isn't it?
Right.
If there's a law that says you can't save the ballot images, I would sure like to know what that law is. And that was the second question I sent to her, okay? Let me bring that up. Yeah, so this is what I sent to her next, okay? So let me share the screen again. Go back to Zoom here. And let me share my screen. And it's this right here. You see this right here?
Yeah.
So I ask her, kindly refer me to the statute or law in which the approval of digital scan equipment in Massachusetts specifically prohibits the capturing of ballot images, right? Like, what law says you have to violate federal law? Federal law says that has to be stored for 22 months. So after that, Sean, she sends me a follow-up message, okay? And this is a follow-up message. Doesn't answer the question. She says, attached, please find the certification of 2 different types of digital scan equipment in Massachusetts. I never asked for that. Then she says, please note that while the ballot images, okay, while the ballot images are not stored, the actual ballots voted on any federal election are secured and stored for 22 months. That's a paper, okay? Mm-hmm. In accordance with federal law. That's fine, but look at this, what she says. However, under state law, those ballots must remain sealed until such time they can be destroyed. So the paper that went through the machine is sealed. No one can get access to it. And the ballot images do not exist, which means they were destroyed.
So it's impossible for you to demand a recount because they say there's nothing to recount, right? Their hands are tied. This makes my blood boil.
Exactly.
This is what the Democrats are going to do all across this country and worse. Okay, we're finding ballots in garbage cans now. All right, this whole thing is a fix, and it just makes my blood boil. So how do you demand? How do you get your recount?
Well, so this is what I wrote back, okay? So I wrote back to her, destroying ballots is illegal. The ballot images, remember, this is the chief counsel of the Secretary of State. The ballot image, destroying ballots is illegal. The ballot images, et cetera, right? I said, Michelle, first, you have not answered my question from my previous email. I repeat below. Please answer the question. Kindly refer me to the statute or law in which the approval of digital scan equipment in Massachusetts specifically prohibits the capturing ballot images. Second, neither the people of Massachusetts nor I are stupid. I presume you must be under incredible pressure from Bill Galvin, which is Secretary of State, and Charlie Baker, who's a rhino governor who Trump just hit. He hit him hard. And he said, about voter fraud, because Baker was complaining that Trump wasn't going to step down if there was voter fraud. When Baker is a mastermind of voter fraud to deflect this issue. And then I say, however, the fact is the state has illegally destroyed ballots. The electronic equipment used to tally and count the vote must first create an image, the ballot image, in order for the vote to be processed and counted by the machine. When the image is created, the image becomes the ballot. You see what I'm saying, Sean? This is the central point, as it is the entity used to count the vote. If no image was created, no vote could exist. You are required by federal law to store, preserve, and archive those ballots for 22 months. I'm talking about the actual ballot images. If those ballot images do not exist, they were destroyed. This destruction is illegal, and therefore the election is null and void. Once again, please answer my question above. And so what I did, Sean, I put my email interaction on Twitter, okay? These are, by the way, this is not private communications. She's a public official. By law, it's my email I'm allowed to share. Twitter, and the day before, Trump hit Baker, Charlie Baker, because Baker was complaining about Trump, but it was really an attack on us. Because Charlie Baker looks at the camera and goes, and when an election is over, it's over. The people have spoken. So the point is, Charlie Baker was attacking Trump, but it was a veiled attack on us, okay? So Trump did a tweet which went viral, and he said, Rhino Charlie Baker, wants to support mail-in voting. I mean, you can go read it. The bottom line is we've uncovered, and by the way, we have now in writing them saying they destroyed the ballots, essentially.
Right.
So there's a very, very Soros-funded, CCP-funded organization, which Steve Bannon brought out, called Lead Stories, which is a quote-unquote bullshit fact-checking organization for Facebook. And they just put out something. They said they could try to reach me for my side of the story. All they did, Sean, was they just shared the Secretary of State's, that woman's side of the story, okay? They never shared my side of the story. These fools don't understand that the ballot image is the ballot.
How could they have spun this, though? So what'd they say about this?
They have nothing to say. They have nothing to say. In fact, an AP reporter called me, and she said, oh, do you not agree they didn't collect the ballot images? I said, ballots? I said, wait a minute. Do you understand they're confusing you and thinking you're an idiot? And the reality is the ballot image was created. So if something is created, if it does not exist, it was destroyed. So they're being very, very, sort of vanilla flavored here, trying to tell you, oh, we don't capture ballot images. No, you freaking destroyed them because they were created, because without creation, you cannot count the vote. So the bottom line is I did an initial protest at the state Secretary of State's office. And this is why I believe there's a God, Sean. As we were showing up, sorry about that, let me repeat that. We were doing a protest. The Attorney General's there, Maura Healey, another corrupt person. And you know what she's doing, Sean, is she's doing a media interview and she's putting on a mask just for the media interview and taking it off. And I point that out. She comes over to me. She says, good day. I said, bullshit, Maura. I said, are you going to follow up on this? So you have the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the governor. And by the way, in 2014, Charlie Baker, the governor, was ripping up ballots, shredding them, of another candidate who was opposing him for governor. That was taken to court. It went past summary judgment, which means it was going to be a full trial. They got so scared they settled with him because people would have gone, there would have been criminal charges. Bottom line, Sean, is and I have full standing. I'm the senator who got screwed. So I have legal standing. We have discovered they destroyed the ballot images. It is against violation of federal law. This isn't voter fraud, Sean. This goes down to the heart of the issue. Whether there's mail-in or not, that's a secondary issue. The issue is that when people come bottoms up, they can manipulate. So it's always doofus one on the Republican Party facing doofus two on the Democrat Party. That's what has occurred here in Massachusetts. So we are moving forward. By the way, our volunteers are working people. So we're continuing. We're going to do a write-in campaign, Sean. And I don't know if you can see this here. It says Stop Election Fraud. And we're going all out. We're escalating this because the reality is that we would have defeated Ed Markey, who's a Democrat. The quote-unquote Republicans are in cahoots with the Democrats, so they always find a designated fool to lose. That is the operation. That's the operation that takes place in Massachusetts, Sean.
Well, if there's any good news here, and it's hard to find good news when you feel so overwhelmed by thieves and liars and cheaters, but if there's any good news, it's that they're messing with the wrong guy, Shiva. I know you're not gonna just lay down and go back to sleep and lick your wounds and just go hide in a corner. So that's the good news. But the bad news is the election's coming up in November, and your name's not going to be on the ballot. Like, there's no way. Well, write-in votes. But I mean, let's be realistic here. The outrage is that the system is crooked. Yeah. Right? And Democrats across the country with rhinos, Republicans in name only, in many cases are going to steal elections or try to steal the entire election and implant Biden. And then when President Trump raises the same questions you're raising, the same issues you're raising, the deep state will say, oh, he's contesting the election when he clearly lost. We better get the military in there to remove him, which is a coup. That's how far gone we are, Shiva. And it scares the crap out of me. It really does. It really bothers me because how do we take this country back when the opposition is so damned crooked and evil, frankly? They're evil.
Well, at the night, so Sean, I have been a math guy all my life. I won major math awards. When I looked at the data, I knew 325,000 people were going to vote. So when I looked at the data, Sean, I knew that I had won 200 to 100. When I saw those freaking results coming in, I realized they were cheaters. So if you look at my speech that I gave at the night, I basically said election fraud took place in third world Massachusetts. And I said, F you, Charlie Baker, F you, this other fool, and F you, the Secretary of State. So to your point, we're not conceding. And we also found in one city, 3,000 ballots just showed up. And they're still counting, and the town clerk resigned. In another city, 750 new ballots found out. And one of the things, Sean, we started matching the actual voter rolls of who came into those precincts, vote, and the ballots. Well, in one city, by the way, out of the 15 cities we asked for data, only 3 have delivered. And in all 3 cities, the difference is from 100 to 1,800 votes. In Newton, 1,800 more people cast ballots than actually people came into the precincts. Okay?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. And just to be clear for the audience and for the rhinos out there and for the Democrats, I'm not outraged because I think Shiva won and got cheated. I'm outraged because I don't know. And because the system's so crooked, you can't get a recount. That's what outrages me.
And you can't verify the process. Look, as a scientist, Sean, if anyone, I can tell you that, you remember this paper that got retracted on hydroxychloroquine about 2 months ago?
Yep.
Okay, so in science, this occurs, right? You come up with an experiment, and that's called the methodology section of your paper. So if you want to say, okay, I want to prove hydroxychloroquine is dangerous, the methodology section would say, I'm making this up, for example, step 1, get 20 mice. Step 2, inject those, or give those 20 mice hydroxychloroquine, this dosage, right? Step 3, see if, they were protected from COVID. Step 4, then you publish your data, okay? Now, which is the output, the data. Okay, 80% of mice died, 20% didn't. Okay, then you publish that. That's the results of this methodology. Well, when that is published in a journal, I, as a citizen, you as a scientist can say, hey, show me the data. And that's what happened with hydroxychloroquine. There was no data. Well, the paper got retracted. Now look at the same situation here. Some methodologies run, some people come into a place called a precinct, by the way, no voter ID, no validation. And then the system has the ability to manipulate the percentages called the weighted race. And all we're seeing on Fox News or CNN are some numbers. Shiva got X, Doofus got Y, right? And what's really interesting, Sean, is I got the same number of votes now that I got with a quarter of the name brand visibility in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, unbelievable. Anyway, so all we're doing is we're seeing these numbers. And to your point, forget if I won or not. As a scientist, as a citizen, you want to say, oh, can you show me the data to prove it, right? Show me that I have this disease or that. Oh, the cardiologist will say, here's the image. I took the image of your body because that image is the evidence, right? And, oh, see, you have these spots over here or whatever, right? Well, show me the image. They don't have the ballot image. Well, where are they? Oh, we destroyed them.
No, I know.
This is so freaking ridiculous. In every other, as a private company, I have to fill out all my 7 companies. I do meticulous work. I pay my auditors and my accounts a ton of money to fill out my things, and every dollar matches, right? Well, we have votes are not matching. The people came in or not. We don't have the ballot images. This is a freaking third world country.
No, I know. It's so outrageous, man, because it's like you feel wronged. You've probably been wronged. You ask to see the data. They say, oh, we don't have the data. You contest, and they call you a conspiracy theorist. I mean, It's just ridiculous. And it's that case across the board in this country because our enemies, the people that rival us, the opposition, has sold out to evil. Okay, they don't play fair. They don't play fair. They do not play fair. They lie, cheat, and steal. Look at Ilhan Omar. Look what's going on in Minneapolis right now. Busted by Project Veritas. Do you think the local media is going to do anything about that, say anything about that? Do you think CARE 11 or CCO or KSTP or the Star Tribune is going to do honest reporting about the fact that Ilhan Omar is paying to harvest ballots in Minneapolis? I mean, my blood is boiling because this election, November, is the line in the sand for we the people. All right, the Democrats represent an existential threat against our way of life, the Republic, and the Constitution, Shiva, and they're going to cheat to win.
And I think, Sean, the wording we need to start using is Americans versus those people who are against this country. Because the term Republican and Democrat in many ways has been spoiled by the rhinos and the GOP establishment.
Right.
And the way, so our political theory is the following. All of these attacks are against working people in this country. If you look at what's been happening, the guy who actually gets up and works, actually runs a business, actually tries to make better, he's been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. The people who do not work, who don't do anything, get elevated on both sides of the spectrum. On the high income, the 0.001%, on the bottom income.
That's
so
right.
Working people are the one, and the point I reached is this election fraud issue. It's beyond lowercase Democrat, lowercase Republican, lowercase independent, right? I don't care if you're a freaking white supremacist or you're a black supremacist. I don't care if you're pro-marijuana, against marijuana. It's irrelevant because the election fraud issue is the operating system of this country. And when you don't have integrity in that, you got nothing. Whether you want to vote for any issues, at the state and local level, the whole thing can be manipulated end to end. And you're looking at someone who never wanted to run electoral politics did it. And the problem they have, I think, Sean, is I know math. I've been programming all my life, and I can articulate this. And we have to destroy them because, in my speech I gave on September 1st, when I said it's so important now that we have the Second Amendment. And I say that not as a threat, but it is really, really valuable we have that in this country. Because come November 3rd, the level of degradation that's happened by the people you've talked about is a time for people to wake up. And if they don't wake up, I'm telling you, this country's game, set, match. It's over. It really is. I say that just looking at the numbers. I look at it saying at the facts. But this Lead Stories organization, funded by the Chinese Communist Party, funded by Soros, is now the fact checker. I mean, we should bring it up. They're totally lying. They said that I said that there are over 1 million votes in the Republican primary. No, I said the U.S. Senate primary. And they have essentially completely lied on their own page. They never contacted me. I don't have any phone call from them. So you have the fact checkers themselves being funded by enemies of the American people. So I think it may be time for a freaking revolution, man. That's what I really believe.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Given all the data that you have and the email correspondence with these people whose job it is to assure honest elections, who can you sue? I mean, because somebody needs to be damaged. Somebody needs to pay the price for this.
I don't want to talk about that, Sean, but there are a lot of people who need to be sued.
No, I agree, because it's time to take the fight to these people directly and hold them personally accountable.
Yeah. Well, to let everyone know, Friday at 1 p.m., our goal, I've always believed in people power, Sean, bottoms up. And people need to take to the streets on Friday. I don't know what the date is. I think it's October 1st at 1 p.m. in front of the Secretary of State. We call on all patriots to show up. We need to put these people on notice because these people are the criminals. Charlie Baker, the governor, is a criminal. The Secretary of State, the Attorney General, all of them are united. And they're all united. Baker is not a true Republican. He's a rhino. The Secretary of State, Sean, has been in there for 40 freaking years. He was brought up on charges for manipulating military votes many years ago. So that's what you have. And Massachusetts, I keep saying, is where they test stuff. And they're testing this on me. They're seeing how much they can get away with. So I'm like the beta test.
Yeah, well, Tim Canova already endured what you're enduring in 2016, and the hardcore, disgusting criminal Debbie Wasserman Schultz re-won her seat again because they cheated. And it makes my blood boil, man, because those of us that are red-blooded patriots, we want to get behind good people who care about the Constitution like you, and then we see things like this happen. You want to talk about no justice, no peace, these idiots for BLM marching in the streets. Do you think they care one bit about rigged elections? All right, so Friday is October 2nd. So where exactly would you have patriots in Massachusetts show up?
1 Ashburton Place, which is a Secretary of State's office in Boston. 1 Ashburton Place. Everyone should show up. This issue is a fundamental issue. So this Friday, October 2nd, 1 p.m., 1 Ashburton Place in Boston, Massachusetts, which is the Secretary of State's office.
All right. Otherwise, the only choice when the election happens is a write-in vote for Dr. Shiva, huh?
A write-in vote, and we're taking, we have, to give you an idea how, by the way, 2 senators won on write-in votes. I don't know if you know that. Lisa Murkowski in Alaska and Strom Thurmond.
So I did not. No,
it's not unlikely. And remember, out of the 4.7 million registered voters in Massachusetts, 1.7 million who I call dark matter, the people who, probably they're the smart ones, don't believe in the system, don't bother voting, okay? Well, those people are the kind of people that have supported our campaign. 60% of our campaign were people who would say, Shiva, I never voted. I have so much faith in you. I know you can do it. Those are the people. So those 1.7 million people in this election, about 3 million people vote, but there's 1.7 million people who are registered to vote who don't vote, Sean. So that is where this write-in campaign, it's what I call dark matter. So this, this says to people, it's a little bit hard to read here, but it says stop election fraud at the bottom. And it says write in. And then on the back of this card, it teaches people how to do it. And we're handing out these cards all over Massachusetts, millions of them.
Could people literally just write in Dr. Shiva and that would count? Okay, yes. Because here's the other question. Given what we've just recounted, how in the world would we expect anything fair to happen in November using
Well,
the
here's
same
the
damn
deal.
machines.
A write-in vote is hand counted. Okay?
All right.
It's hand counted. But the point is, look, I'm looking at the long game here, right? I see all of this to galvanize and wake up people. I'm also an educator, as you know, Sean. I've been teaching most of my life, but I'm not just sort of a academic. So to me, I plunge myself in life, and what's happening is in Massachusetts, people are being woken up. People know I freaking won, man. Everywhere you go. I was in the North End. 50 people came up to me. I mean, 90%, 95% of people know me now. We plowed so much into advertising, TV, radio. We had 12, 14 billboard ads running, Sean. So everyone knows us. So they got a major problem right now because I built up the brand equity, and all we have to do is tell people to write in. But more importantly, we can educate a large swath of people on how crooked these people are. Abroad, and even by their own crookery, Sean, I still got 40%. Okay, that's not a small set of people. So if you have, by their crookery, 100,000 people who are enlightened, when we know there's at least 200, 300,000 people in the primary who voted for me, think about what we can do. So the main goal right now, our central message is Massachusetts destroyed over 1 million ballots, period. And second messaging here is the election is null and void. Unite to write in Dr. Shiva for U.S. Senate to stop election fraud. And this goes beyond quote unquote left and right, beyond black and white. You see, the establishment always wants black people and white people fighting, Sean, if you notice that. Every election cycle, so they got over here the BLM people, and over here the people say, I don't want to defund the police. And typically white people are supposed to be here, and the liberals are the black people. Well, my issues, people and police have always been united, especially when there's been movements against the establishment, because the police always, they're us, they're one of us. So they want to divide us, Sean. So this issue, in my view, is a great unifying issue. Look, I don't care what side you're on, but we should all come together as Americans against election fraud, because we have nothing. There's no country. It's nothing. There's nothing.
Yeah, it's a banana republic.
It's a banana republic, and Massachusetts is a banana republic. The fact that they didn't store those or destroy those ballot images says that they can do whatever they want, violating federal law.
All right, final question here, and it's about the Diebold voting machines. Now, I believe after Bev Harris with black box voting began to do a lot of investigation work in this area, I think Diebold divested or sold off or got out of the vote machine counting business. Now, here's the thing, though. We're hearing that Soros may be involved. Here's an article from Business Insider. They're claiming, listen to this, Soros does not own the company in question. Also, the Smartmatic voting machines are not even going to be used in this year's elections. Smartmatic is owned by Lord Mark Malloch Brown. Oh my God, what a name. Malloch? Lord Malloch owns Smartmatic. He's connected to Soros through the Open Society Foundation, an organization that gives grants to civil society organizations around the world. So again, soft-pedaling Soros as being the good guy, the benevolent George Soros. In your view, what have you learned about these voting machines? Who owns them? Who controls them? How widespread throughout the country are the voting machines that were used to fix your election, to rig your election?
Let me tell you, it's about 99%. Let me tell you, I've been in software all my life, Sean. As you know, I created the first email system when I was 14. In software, when I learned back then is, you create a set of features and you're constantly evolving your software, right? You make version 2, version 3. Well, and if someone comes and buys your software company, guess what happens? That code gets ported, right? And someone comes, buys that company. The code just sort of filters, right? There's a core set of code that's everywhere, right? Linux may have different flavors of Linux, but Linux, the core kernel of Linux is the same, for example, right? So the Diebold voting machines were sort of that kernel. Those features of the weighted race were there. If you look at the history of when they sold it and they flipped it, this company got it, then another company bought some of their code. So that code, the core code of the weighted race, is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere, at least in 99% of the voting machines. So the issue is, why are we at a programmatic level treated as a decimal or a fraction? Why is my vote, and Bev Harris and Benny Smith brought this out. They've shown it. They don't have the big platforms. That's why when I spoke to Bev and Benny, they were so happy. They said, Shiva, you understand the math. Many times it takes us like 5 months to teach this to people. You got it in 5 minutes. So the bottom line is, Sean, the bottom line, Sean, is we are saving an individual's vote, the candidates or the individual, as a fraction. Why is that even allowed? Why is that feature even in the freaking systems?
So they can rig elections.
For cheating.
Yeah. All right. So
it's based on cheating.
What would you say to President Donald Trump? What is your view right now on what's going on with all the mail-in ballots? I know we got to wrap this up, but I'm just really curious because we're all pretty certain at this point that President Trump will be president again after the election if there's an honest vote, if there's an honest election. But with all of these mail-in ballots, we're finding things in garbage cans now. We're seeing all sorts of fraud right now. Shiva, what are your thoughts on that? If you were President Trump, what would you do or say? How do you put an end to this?
Well, what I would do right now is the first thing I would do is that I would say that all the votes should be hand counted. First step. Hand counted, Sean, because you can't trust anything else. Look, they can flip things fast. Second is I would, if I were president, I would have the Federal Election Commission and the Attorney General indict the three people that we're talking about in Massachusetts. Charlie Baker, the Secretary of State. He's got a beautiful case here. They are telling us, as I showed you through those emails, yeah, we deleted the ballots. We don't have to follow federal law. We do whatever the hell we want. They should be thrown in jail, criminal. That's what I would do because he has an awesome opportunity, the president, with what we've discovered here. And I don't think it's just, coincidence that we found this out. So I would do that. And I would say all the votes need to be hand counted because all these machines are compromised. They're all compromised. And that's the problem. As a technologist, I can tell you that what's happened with technology is that as technology has progressed, we thought we would all get better lives. But what's happened is fewer and fewer and fewer people can control those technologies, which means they can manipulate events across billions of people at a fraction of a second. That's what's going on. This is the unfortunate problem of technology when we don't have people controlling it. We don't control this tech. It's lobbyists control it. A few set of power. So 5 companies, Google, Twitter, Facebook, AT&T and Verizon in the United States can turn you and I off overnight. I was just I've never been put in Twitter jail. I've never done anything wrong for 7 days because I shared that information. Unbelievable. And that Baker and Maura Healey called Twitter, Jack Dorsey, who's, by the way, supports BLM, right? Supports all this forced vaccination stuff. We're living in very, very fascist times. And I think it's a very dangerous time. And I think the president, he should strike while I don't think he should delay. I think every day that goes by that he doesn't hit these guys hard, Sean, I think in my view, they're going to plan a landslide for Biden. That's what they're planning. A bogus landslide victory. And they can do what they are trying to do to us here, right? Flip it. Oh, Shiva, what are you talking about? It wasn't even close, right? 60-40, right? That's the goal.
Yeah. It's unimaginable that they could get away with that when you see Trump rallies versus Biden get-togethers. Right? Nobody shows up to see bumbling Biden. Well, I'll tell you what, man, as we're having this conversation today on Monday, on Tuesday night when I post this interview, the first presidential debate between President Trump and Sleepy Joe Biden will be taking place, and I cannot wait to see it because there is no way Biden will emerge from that debate in one piece. There's no way he's going to look good going up against our lucid, comedic, patriotic president.
Right. I think, Sean, when you put this up, hit these people lead stories. They're a Soros Chinese-funded organization. They're trying to discredit the facts. They put them wrong. They share to one side of you, hit them hard. Because that lead stories is used as a fact checker by Facebook to pull down other people. They need to be destroyed.
All right. Heads up to President Donald Trump. It's time to indict some people in Massachusetts.
Exactly.
And Dr. Shiva, before we let you go, can you please tell people how they can follow you and support you on Twitter?
On Twitter, it's VA_Shiva. My Twitter, I'm basically a political prisoner, if you want to think about it, right? I'm a U.S. Senate candidate. Twitter has essentially interfered in a U.S. Senate election. And so that's VA_Shiva on Twitter. And you can go to, Shiva Ayyadurai on Facebook and Instagram, etc. And people should just go to Shiva for Senate, Sean. We got a great website, SHIVA4Senate.com. And it's a wonderful site because right on that webpage, if I can share it very quickly here, people can go and they can understand how to get access to our campaign. There's the write-in we're running. People can donate. They can say that they're writing in for the campaign, and everything's right here. We also have an affidavit running from all the last time people said they're voted. The campaign videos up there, everything. It's a great website. And we have amazing volunteers, Sean, but people can go to Shiva4Senate.com, and to write in, it's just Dr. Shiva for U.S. Senate. And people want to know more, they can click on this button which says write in Dr. Shiva, and we tell them exactly how to do it, Sean. I don't know if you can see this here. It's very simple, right? They put in Dr. Shiva, and they can fill in the circle. Okay?
Excellent. Well, Dr. Shiva, thank you so much. I appreciate your truth-telling. I'm glad you're taking on this fight. I really think they picked a fight with the wrong guy.
Well, let's escalate. Let's put out the facts out there, because we have all the data. They are telling us that they destroyed the ballots. The ballot images are the ballots. So we got them by the short hair.
It's treason, friends. I mean, it's just nothing less than treason. When your vote doesn't count, then what are you? I mean, really, what are you? You're a slave on their plantation, friends.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Support Dr. Shiva. Thank you. Thanks, Doc.
Thanks. Be well, Sean.
You too. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We very much appreciate your support. A shout out to our patrons and to those members over at sgtreport.tv for the exclusive weekly content. And guys, you can always get the latest real news, the antidote to corporate propaganda, for free every single day at sgtreport.com. Thanks for tuning in, friends. God bless.
God bless you. Bye-bye, Sean.
Bye-bye.
So the heads of these watchdogs are all totally bent. They are handpicked by the banksters, and none of them will touch the Epstein money laundering operation. So that money laundering, the Epstein ring, was used to cover up the kingpins of the LIBOR manipulation.